This is Jim Inkster. Thank you for joining us for Talk Louisiana. 877-217-5757 is your number. Robin Dow producing. And if you would like to send an email, talk@talklouisiana.org is the place to go. We start our show, and certainly we hope you had a great 4th of July holiday. But Mandie Landry is in the House, an American attorney, politician serving District 91 in the Louisiana House of Representatives from the great city of New Orleans, graduate of Notre Dame and Georgetown. She's seeking re-election. A few weeks ago, we had her opponent, Madison O'Malley, on, but Mandie is busy right now, and there is the prospect of a special legislative session, a veto session. Governor Edwards has vetoed 25 bills, and lawmakers generally don't come back for more, but they did 2 years ago and came up short when they tried to overturn a gubernatorial veto of a transgender bill, and this time we're back to where we were in 2021. Mandie Landry, your insights into where we are at this point, and good morning.
Good morning. Nice to meet everyone. So, yeah, the topic of the day in the legislature, and as you said, I've been there 4 years, is are we going to have a veto session? And overall, I think no. It's a numbers game. Either the majority of either chamber can essentially cancel it. There's some math and calculations there, and I think despite it being election year, and if we go back, this could blossom into something a lot more complicated. So my view is that it isn't, but there are very many passionate people who feel strongly about the anti-LGBT bills that are rallying the troops. So we'll know by July 13th.
And if it happens, we'll be in session. You will be on July 18th, and the election is getting close. Qualifying's August the 8th through 10th, and the election, folks, is 100 days from tomorrow, October 14th. So we are getting
good to know.
Closer.
Exact
and
number.
closer.
Exact number.
Well, override session likely to happen. That was the headline in the 4th of July Advocate and Picayune. I'm not sure it's going to happen because you say you got to have a majority in both chambers, and lawmakers fully realize that transgender legislation isn't going to rock the world one way or the other, but symbolically it means a lot to some people, and some people want this session, and they want to send a message to Governor John Bel Edwards and anybody else who sits in that chair. Is that emotion and initiative, is it enough to get lawmakers back to the Capitol for round two?
I think my House colleagues, the Republicans, are going to feel greater pressure to agree to come back. Those races are kind of wild, and that has happened before where a veto session or two that they all agreed to come back. The Senate is a little different story. It is a little more deliberative. There are fewer than them, and there are several who are termed out or who are not coming back. And it's going to be harder to convince those handful of people, especially the ones not coming back, that they need to come back and do this. So this is going to rest on the Senate, which is not uncommon for these highly charged issues. But I'm leaning towards, if I had to bet right now, I'm leaning towards we are not going back.
And Representative Landry, we are fully aware that there is an election in 101 days, and there may very well be a more conservative governor next year who would probably joyfully sign similar legislation. So why not wait for another day?
That's probably what some Republicans are telling other Republicans, if I had to guess. Say, hey, we can do this next year. But the motives of the people who are pushing for a session are, I assume, varied. I think some of them think this is extremely important and very timely. There are going to be some who want some campaign footage. That's just a fact of life of being a politician. And the issue is hot right now. But what we've seen every year is there's a new issue that these national groups push. It's the library issue. It was CRT. Years ago, it was anti-LGBT or anti-gay agendas, period. And now it's shifted to trans issue and shifted to trans healthcare. So next year, it'll probably be something different.
Mm-hmm. Well, as mentioned, any of the 25 vetoes by the governor could be on the table in a veto session, but it is this transgender, the gender affirming care for minors that has gained a lot of attention. Also, the Don't Say Gay bill and the pronoun bill. Now, those could be thrown out for free speech issues, First Amendment, and the other one already has been rejected by higher courts, including a court in Arkansas. So there are other vehicles to bring this ultimately to the Supreme Court, which is probably what will happen. And some would say this is a waste of time and money if this is why lawmakers are coming back. So is it just this, the transgender stuff, or is it any of the 25 vetoes that might propel the legislature into returning to the Capitol?
That is a concern for coming back, and I think the leadership and maybe people who have tight elections. And look, I'm not privy to internal Republican communications. I hear a little bit, but just from a legislator, that is a huge risk if we go back. That a lot of these other bills will come back up for a veto, especially if the momentum is there to go back and to override the anti-trans affirming care. The trans child affirming care bill. I have to imagine that the governor and leadership is extremely worried that if we go back, that other bills will come up. The governor also vetoed other related bills, some criminal justice bills. He did a lot of line item vetoes in the budget and in the capital outlay bill, and all of those will be up for grabs if we go back. Anybody can make a motion to vote to overturn any of those bills.
877-217-5757 for Mandie Landry, State Representative, District 91, New Orleans, and we will go to the phones in a moment. But a listener notes you're a graduate of two great Catholic universities, a BA from Notre Dame and a law degree from Georgetown. And obviously these issues, according to the church, are viewed much differently than a lot of Catholic politicians, such as Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, and go down the list. But is there a disconnect between some who say, look, we Catholics should be denied communion if we are in favor of a woman's right to choose an abortion, or for a person to have the right to change, or I wouldn't say change, but become the gender that they feel they are most comfortable with? What to physically become? What do you make of this?
So I went to Catholic school my whole life, from kindergarten through the end of law school, 20 years, or I don't have the calculations in front of me. So I have been very vocal as a legislator about my views as someone who was raised Catholic and how they are different. And my views as a recovering Catholic are that the Catholic Church, which covered up child rape for decades and decades and has contributed to the effects of child abuse in this country, I think they have no right to tell, whether it's to tell me to use birth control or not have an abortion, or to tell people how to live their life as a gay person or as a trans person. There is no moral ground there. The major reason I am not a practicing Catholic is because we have to use this word, child rape, decades of child rape. And so if someone says that they are against birth control or trans healthcare or something like that because of their religion, I do believe them. But my view as a legislator and as a Catholic, that I'm not following that dogma because of what that dogma has also done to children. So that's my personal opinion on it. And anyone says that a Catholic should be excommunicated because of something like this needs to look at these priests first. And that's my view.
Well, some of us are cafeteria Catholics. We pick and choose.
Yes.
But do you still go to church, Mandie?
I do not anymore, unless it's a holiday with my mother. I've really become disillusioned as an adult the more we find out about the priests, the rapists who were protected and moved around. And we didn't know this stuff when I was growing up. There were maybe whispers of it, but we know a lot of this now. And there have been a couple of bills in the legislature by my Orleans delegation rep, Jason Hughes, about opening up the time limits on liability to go after some of these priests, to give some of these now adults some closure. And while I think that helps, there's been very little acknowledgement by the church that they were responsible for that. So I guess you would say I'm a cafeteria Catholic. I embrace the hippie Jesus and rejects the dogma. That would be my statement.
Well, we appreciate your candor, and I'm sure many feel as you do. And I think
Yeah.
I'm not speaking for Senator Landry, but I believe she has left the church because she was all but excommunicated because she was in favor of abortion rights. And there are political issues, and then there are religious issues. And last time I checked in this country, we have separation of church and state, and simply because somebody is in favor of a woman having the option to choose an abortion doesn't mean they're advocating for that woman to have an abortion. But we'll spend some more time with Mandie Landry, and this is becoming a provocative conversation, just as we like it. 877-217-5757, back after this. This is Jim Inkster. Thank you for joining us for Talk Louisiana. 877-217-5757, one of the more vocal members of the state legislature, one of the younger ones, and one of the few females, and really one of the few white Democrats. Mandie Landry is with us. And in Louisiana, we have become an overwhelmingly Republican state in the state legislature and in statewide offices. There is an election in 101 days, and Mandie Landry is running for re-election to the Louisiana House of Representatives. Again, 877-217-5757 is your number. Doug on Coursey. Doug, you're on with Representative Landry. Hello, Doug.
I hope that they don't come back in a special session, but I feel that the Republicans' ability to control themselves is very limited, and that they won't be able to stop. But let's hope they don't. Appreciate the representative fighting a good fight. But the fact that they took in a fiscal session so much time and effort to go after these groups that they don't like just indicates that they will do it again in a special session.
Thank you, Doug. Mandie, your thoughts?
Yes and no. What's different about this session is that it's election year for the most part. So that does add it does on one hand add a different persuasion on some people, but then on the other hand, like I said, there are people who are term limited and not returning and just kind of don't want to deal with this. What a lot of people don't realize is, I would say at least half, if not the majority of Republicans on a personal and principle level don't agree with bills like this. They don't like them. They personally would not file a bill like this, but there is immense political pressure from Right to Life and the Family Forum and these groups to go back into a session. So I think the caller is right that there's a lot of pressure there. I still think we're teetering in the middle because leadership and the governor have to be worried about what might happen if we go back.
877-217-5757. Robin Dow and Asia Gillard producing, and Barry in Mid-City. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, and good morning, Representative Landry. I am wondering if you would comment on the issue of book banning, which appears very important to some conservative political leaders, and of course was a precursor to Holocaust in Europe. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Barry in Mid-City. Rabbi Barry, Mandie Landry, State Rep, your thoughts about book banning?
He's right about the precursor. We have seen so many of the recent hot button issues just repeating history. The book banning, the attacks on LGBT people, the pink triangle from World War II, Donald Trump's rhetoric, which ironically he stole some of it from Huey Long. All of this has happened before, and it seems like we don't learn from it, or at least some of us don't learn from it. And I do think, to an extent, the leaders of these maniacal movements, they know that issues like this and hot button issues have worked before to rile people up. And I think it's on purpose. And the fact that as a country we just keep forgetting some of the worst parts of our past and worldwide past is part of the reason.
Now, Although he previously called the measure unneeded, Governor Edwards signed a bill into law that seeks to restrict minors' access to material it defines as sexually explicit. I don't think the bill is necessary, is what Edwards said earlier this month. The biggest challenge we have with kids in libraries is we don't have enough kids in libraries who will read books.
Right.
But then he signed the bill. Now, is he just trying to split the baby and show that he is open to at least thoughts and actions by the legislature on the conservative front, even though he won't go far enough to give them what they want on transgender legislation?
I think you're right that he was trying to split the baby, and I thought that from the beginning of session. I said he's going to have to sign one, at least, and the library one, in a sense, not constitutionally probably, but in a sense is sort of the weaker one. I mean, kids have the internet. Come on, like this bill is ridiculous. They can find anything they want out there. And the bill was diluted to a point by the time it was passed. I think now, if I remember correctly, the basic point is that minors will have two separate library cards, one that's from their parents that says they cannot access certain material, and the other that says they have permission to. It's less bad than it could have been, but I agree about the split the baby.
James and Metairie. James, you're on the air with Representative Landry.
Well, good morning, Jim. Good morning, Representative. Good luck to you in your upcoming election, by the way. Recently, the Supreme Court ruled in a case described as freedom of speech, which allowed a website business owner to act as an anti-LGBT bigot and prohibiting her or to have a requested to have a website design. Now, speaking of prohibition and big business, what about throughout the years, the so-called pro-life forces in the state lobbied and they received a pro-life license plate. But when it comes up to the pro-choice side, having a pro-choice license plate, they lobby against that. Anything that you want to do about that to change it? And thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for the nice comment at the beginning. I hope I'm there for 4 more years to work on these issues. The anti-choice movement, Louisiana Right to Life mostly, and the Family Forum, they have so much power in the state. And your point about the license plates is just sort of one symbolic power that they're able to prevent us. We didn't even vote on something like that this term. I think they have in the past. But they get what they want on these issues. I had a bill this year. It's the most important bill I've filed and was the saddest outcome, to just codify in Louisiana law that we will not criminally charge women who have an abortion. It's very simple and straightforward. It's what Right to Life and all these groups say. It's what my colleagues said last year. It is somewhat in Louisiana law, but it's kind of vague. And Louisiana Right to Life came to the table in the committee and they just said, we don't need this bill. And the what that did to those of us who work for reproductive rights, what was the biggest kick in the face we've received, that the state of Louisiana would not admit in law, we will not arrest you if you have an abortion. So you're right. The Right to Life movement, the anti-choice movement, they win everywhere they go, and they even win on license plates. And it's difficult when they have so much power and money.
You have been an advocate of initiative law, which is evident in other states, not in ours. For example, in Arkansas, the people of that great state voted for an increase in minimum wage. It's $11 an hour in Arkansas, conservative state. But in Louisiana, it's much harder to get something on a ballot. Why is there so much pushback on this?
So for people listening, a ballot initiative or a public referendum is when the public gathers enough signatures and they can put an issue directly on the ballot. Right now, we can't in Louisiana. I was merely the latest person in a string of elected officials to try that. Governor Foster did, Jay Darden did, Norby Shabir filed someone, many people did. And it is the same groups, Louisiana Right to Life, lobby, the powerful business industry. I think the sheriffs were in there, Restaurant Association, who killed that bill in committee. And they always kill that bill because they are afraid, as you noted, the people of the state will absolutely vote to raise the minimum wage. They will absolutely vote to legalize recreational marijuana. They'll vote for family leave and other issues important. And those groups have extraordinary power in the Capitol and money, and they have killed it every single time. Every single time someone has brought it up, including the governor, the former governor.
Would the people of the state now because of the Dobbs decision, vote for abortion rights to some level?
There have been some polls on it since then. There were some polls early this year. They would definitely vote for exceptions, rape and incest, the health of the mother, that sort of thing with flying colors. It would probably be 70%. Whether they would vote to completely overturn Roe, some of the polls suggest it. I think that would be a harder lift, but I do think at a minimum we could get those exceptions into law. And a lot of people say publicly, including the governor, that he agrees with some of these exceptions, but all of them, along with my bill, died in committee this year. They didn't even make it out.
877-217-5757. You're hearing the voice of Representative Mandie Landry. We'll be back after this. This is Jim Inkster. Thank you for being with us for Talk Louisiana. Hope you had a great holiday, and we're pleased to have, for a little while longer, State Representative Mandie Landry, who, as you can hear, expresses her point of view. She is a Democrat from New Orleans, graduate of Notre Dame and Georgetown. As she said, educated in Catholic schools from kindergarten through law school. And now she is no longer practicing the Catholic faith, but of course, I guess culturally, you'll always be a Catholic. And my guess is that you had a lot of nuns and probably a few priests instruct you along the way, Mandie.
I had a few. Both of my schools were, though, largely non-priest and non-teachers. There were quite a few going around. I look back on my Catholic schools, and whether this was just a stroke of luck or indicative of New Orleans schools, but compared to my friends around the country, I had a relatively liberal Catholic upbringing. There was a lot of focus on helping the poor and being non-judgmental and community service and service work. And that has certainly affected who I am today and affects the type of legislator I am. Where
did you attend high school?
Archbishop Blank in Gretna, which has now merged with the former Immaculata High School.
Okay. And I'm sure you're fully aware that there's a Supreme Court justice who was educated in the New Orleans Catholic school system, Amy Coney Barrett, and she looks at things differently than you do. No problem with that, but that's what this country's all about, isn't it?
It's very interesting. She's a few years older than me, not by too much, and she went to Dominican. And sort of ironically, she went to Notre Dame Law School, which is, quote, a conservative law school like the University of Chicago. And it is very interesting to me that we went to all-girls Catholic high schools in New Orleans and have one university in common and have ended up on wildly different ends of the spectrum, both on social issues and as lawyers. I mean, I see some of these cases come out, and I'm an 18-year practicing lawyer, and I'm just appalled at the constitutional issues and overturning of standing and basic sort of bedrocks of law that we all learned and have depended on, and they're just flipping them over left and right.
877-217-5757 is your number. And talk at talklouisiana.org for State Representative Mandie Landry, a Democrat, and a listener asks if you will be backing Sean Wilson for governor.
Oh, yes, absolutely. The benefits of having a governor in the mansion in the last 8 years are incalculable. That he was able to pass Medicaid expansion, stop some of these bad bills, and just sort of be a balance. And Secretary Wilson would certainly be a help towards balancing these two supermajorities. I do think he has a more difficult battle than the governor did. The governor was already a legislator and had sort of that experience and network. But I do understand that you see that Louisiana kind of likes a dark horse for governor. All of our governors in recent memory were not the front runners. And voters in general, as we see around the country, have a tendency to sort of split power. You'll often see, like with Obama, he was elected, and the next term, the Congress switched. And I think it happened with Bill Clinton, too. So I'm very much supporting him. I actually saw him last week. He's very down to earth. We had a conversation like two very normal people, and I like him tremendously.
So you're for a Wilson and not for a fellow Landry.
Oh, my goodness. I am not related to him or to Swamp People, Landrys, or anyone like that. That's an interesting little point that people from Louisiana know that the last name Landry is extraordinarily common.
Yeah, I looked it up. There are 20,000 of you. 20,000 of you in Louisiana. So if someone, as I've stated before, and I'm not advocating this, but if somebody were really up to some tomfoolery, they would have about 15 Jeff Landrys show up in August and qualify and run for governor.
This state has some funny politics.
Well, it's happened before. Mike Foster had a Mike Foster show up, and years ago
I didn't know that.
Years ago, there was an Edwin Edwards who showed up, and in both cases, those people were talked out of it and ended up not being on the ballot. But that is one of those things that would be outrageous, but it is legal under the current environment. And as you know, elections and politics, anything goes. And of course, a lot of times things go when they're not legal, but this one would be perfectly within the bounds of the law if somebody really wanted to get into the business of trying to steer an election. But I don't know that it's going to happen, and let's hope we have a fair election. And that is Billy Nungesser, the senior, used to say, I don't think that would be fair pool. But Phil and Jefferson's been waiting for a little while. Phil and Jefferson, you're on with Mandie Landry.
Good morning. And listen, I hope that people remember what was going on during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our governor enforced the federal mask mandate, and our attorney general was in Washington filing lawsuits against the mask mandate. He was actively resisting the popular and also for the public health safety. And let's pray to God he isn't elected.
Well, let's pray to God we don't have another pandemic. But this governor and Jeff Landry had differing opinions on how to fight back from COVID. And I must say I don't know how the state stands on that. I think John Bel Edwards did a fine job, but I don't know if a majority of the people agree with all the actions he took. But he was trying to be safe than sorry, and I think Louisiana, considering at the start of the pandemic, we were first in the nation as far as per capita outbreaks, and we ended up being 25th. The governor did a pretty good job of getting it under control, Representative Landry.
Absolutely agree. I haven't seen a poll recently, but everything shown since then is the vast majority of the state did agree with what he did. The state was ground zero. My city was very much ground zero. It was terrifying at that time, and he did what he needed to do. He's a wartime governor. We needed someone like him in there. And the same people yelling very loudly about library bills, drag queens, and trans children are the same people who have been lobbying against mask and vax mandates and all that. And it was disappointing, but not unexpected, to see the attorney general file many of those suits. He's extremely litigious. And he had a win yesterday or the day before. I haven't actually read the opinion on what he was able to win, but he gets some wins sometimes. And seeing our state officials being so at odds on something that affects the public health was kind of scary. And I just hope, like you said, we don't have anything that comes close to the COVID pandemic again.
877-217-5757 and talk at talklouisiana.org in our remaining time with Representative Landry. Another listener, Tom on Bluebonnet, knows that last year you did go to no party at one point. You ran for the state senate in a special election and lost to Royce Duplessis. But you're now a Democrat again. But what was it about switching to no party? What prompted that?
This is an opinion people don't like to hear. The Louisiana State Democratic Party is on its last legs. The chair and the people who run it, they are incompetent, borderline corruption there. And I say incompetent, they have raised no money. They have done nothing with voter registration. They've done almost nothing with recruiting candidates. And what was sort of a lot of people's last straw, well, my last straw was the party actively helping my fellow Democrat opponent, which is completely unheard of and wrong to cannibalize other Democrats. And she also did it in the PSC race with Devontae Lewis. And she also pulled some shenanigans in the Senate race with Gary Chambers. But early this year, she put out this commercial, I guess, suggesting she was running for governor, didn't mention she was a Democrat. And what we found out later was that she had been in confidential conversations with other gubernatorial candidates while she was doing this. I am distressed that our party has deteriorated to this. I know there are so many Democrats and progressives around the state who feel the same as me. They reach out to me. I don't know whether you want to call it protest or extreme frustration. I left for a while. I'm sort of floating there by myself. And just to tie this up at the end, my House colleagues had conversations with me over several weeks before session. And the bottom line was like, our numbers are low. You're a valuable contributor. We really need to get you to come back, and we want you to come back next year. And they were right. And it's frustrating to be in a party where the chair has recruited someone to run against me and has recruited people to run against other Democratic candidates. She needs to go. We need a party revamp, and people need to know that she and others do these things. We have so few Democrats. In the legislature, the House lost 4 white Democrats in the last year, and one wayward sheep, myself, came back. We lost 4 white Democrats. That's where your numbers went. That's why there's a supermajority, and she's very much at fault for it.
What could be done?
Complete revamp. Hopefully enough of us will be back in the party after this election. The election for chair is, I think, early next year. Yeah, or in the spring. There are already people who are working hard to recruit people to run for the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, which each House district has 2 senators in the state body. So they're recruiting good people to run for that and get a new chair and build from the ground up. There are more Democrats, especially Black Democrats, and then independents in this state than there are Republicans. And they are just disillusioned, and we don't reach out to them. And that is our fault as Democratic leaders.
We're going to take a short pause and return for a few more minutes with Mandie Landry, the outspoken representative from District 91, New Orleans. We'll start with Patricia in Magnolia Woods when we return after this brief pause on Talk Louisiana. This is Jim Inkster, and a reminder that there is an election 14 weeks from Saturday, 100 days away from tomorrow will be 100. We're at 101 now, but whatever your party stripes are, or if you're no party, please get out and vote and be a good citizen. And in Louisiana, for various reasons, we vote more prolifically in presidential elections than we do in the gubernatorial elections, which include not only the governor's race, but every other statewide office, and all 144 state legislative seats are on the ballot. So this is a time that arguably is as important or more important than voting for president. In Louisiana, in my lifetime, I suspect we'll never have another Democrat win the Louisiana's electoral votes. It's just a given that the Republican, no matter who it is, whether it's Donald Trump or Mitt Romney or John McCain, they're going to win Louisiana now. The last Democrat to win a presidential election in our state was Bill Clinton in 1996. 877-217-5757 for State Representative Mandie Landry, who is a Democrat, one of the few white Democrats in the state legislature, and says the party needs to be revamped. Patricia in Magnolia Woods. Patricia, you're on the air with Representative Landry.
Good morning. I'm so glad that y'all are going to be working on rebuilding the Democratic Party from the ashes. I was wondering if y'all have plans to do more recruiting on college campuses to encourage students to vote? Thanks.
Thank you, Patricia. What about encouraging people to vote? Stacey Abrams did that in Georgia, and obviously she almost got elected governor, and 2 Democrats did win U.S. Senate seats in Georgia, and that's the only state in the Southeastern Conference where a Democrat has won either a U.S. Senate seat or the presidential election. All the others have gone for Republicans. Your thoughts?
She's absolutely right, and just to point out, the college Democrats and young Democrats in this state are awesome. They are vibrant, they care, they have energy, they're working, and they don't have enough of us encouraging them and pushing them and giving them resources and sort of letting them build the future. They are doing so much, and there are some of us who notice it and know them well and try to mentor, and I really hope we can make them more a part of the family next year. I mean, I, for one, in my elections and my interns, everything's run by people under 25. They're amazing. It's voting. You're right, to get them to vote. College students are a little more challenging because a lot of them choose to vote back home. I have had Tulane students tell me that they keep their voter registration back home because they think their vote matters back in their home state. So we definitely need to do more with registering, but I personally think the bigger haul that would have the best bang for the buck is getting people who are registered to show up, because they are registered. And we do have more people who show up in presidential years. I think statewide, it's, at least in New Orleans, actually, it's closer to 55 or 60. Our gubernatorial years are 40%. Off election years might be down to 10%. Yeah. So I appreciate she notices that, and I agree.
Well, I've said it before, but Joe Biden lost by almost 20 percentage points in the presidential election in Louisiana, but he still got more actual votes than John Bel Edwards did the year before when he won a governor's race in Louisiana, which shows the disparity between those who vote in a presidential election and those who vote in the governor's election, which includes all these other statewide offices. So please, whatever your inclination is, please vote. Chad in Central. Chad, you're on with Representative Landry.
Good morning, Jim. Good morning, State Rep Landry. 2 quick questions. Do you think that the current state chair of the Democratic Party was a plant by the Republicans to undermine the Democratic Party? And number 2, given that Arkansas is leading Louisiana in the minimum wage, imagine if LSU would lose to Arkansas.
You know, back in the day when Arkansas beat LSU in football, when Huey Long was governor, Huey Long actually said that LSU should never lose to Arkansas because we have more paved roads than Arkansas, and that was true in 1930 or 32. But you're right. If LSU loses in football, the world goes nuts in Louisiana. But what about? I don't think that the chair of the party, Katie Bernhardt, was a Republican plant, but she sure has gotten some pushback from people like you, Mandie Landry.
Yeah, no, her being a plant, like a parliamentarian candidate, I frankly don't think politicians in this state are that smart and creative. I think she wasn't the right choice because her idea was to trend more conservative and pull in conservative white Democrats when, to me and to many of us, we have the numbers, and it's organizing and getting out and encouraging our current Democrats, who many are Black Democrats. I think part of the reason she was put in is because of her own personal wealth and her promises. She was seen as someone who could help raise a lot of money, which we desperately need as a party, and she has not done that. And I think it's kind of the opposite. I think she was kind of put in and still stays in because of certain Democrats behind the scene who just kind of want a figurehead and someone who will generally do what they want and stay out of the way. It would be far more interesting if she was a Republican plant, but frankly, they don't even need to do that. Our numbers are so low. Republicans tend to ignore Democrats in the state and fight among themselves nowadays.
What did you make of the tenure of the previous chair?
Problematic, obviously. Karen Carter Peterson is someone I have, grew close to. I did not know any of these people before 2019 when I ran. She's extraordinarily smart and talented, and her addiction, which led to her crimes, was terrible, not only for the party, for Democratic legislators, for herself and her family. And she is doing her time and her penance. What I will say about Karen is she was a prolific fundraiser. She did raise a lot of money for the governor both times. And what I experienced in 19 and 20 and what others experienced before is that she definitely stayed out of Democrat versus Democrat races, unlike the current party chair. And that's extremely important. I think Karen could have done a lot more to build the party from the ground up, for sure.
Well, the previous caller was asking about LSU sports. Well, the Tigers just won the national championship in baseball, and they had this welcoming celebration at Alex Box Stadium. And both the Democratic governor and the Democratic mayor of Baton Rouge were roundly booed, and the mayor more so than the governor. But what in the world's going on when people boo public officials simply because they have that D beside their name?
I did not know that happened, which is interesting because I'm pretty aware of the news. Wow, I can only think that maybe the crowd trended conservative. Maybe.
You think?
That's actually very interesting that they were so excited to be there for the Tigers and that they actually put out the effort.
The mayor could not even be heard. She was booed so loudly.
Wow. I didn't know that. That is, I think that's a little bit surprising that the energy was put out to do that, especially because from what I understand, she's been a good mayor.
Depending on your point of view, she's blamed for crime, and crime is bad.
Welcome to being a mayor. Being
Correct.
a mayor has to be the worst job in the country. You get blamed for everything.
But I have a degree from LSU, and I've covered sports at LSU for over 40 years. And I recall in 1991, I mentioned it on the show, when David Duke was in a runoff for governor. The date was October 26, 91. LSU playing top-ranked Florida State in Tiger Stadium in a driving rainstorm, and Duke's sachets from the press box into the stadium, out in the crowd, gets in the fraternity section. And in a rainstorm, they're hoisting him above the crowd, yelling, "Duke, Duke, 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 Duke." There was no booing of David Duke in Tiger Stadium in the year of 1991, but yet there was a lot of booing of John Bell Edwards and Sharon Weston Broome last week as they tried to salute a national championship team in what should be a bipartisan affair, but it turned out to be one in which people showed their dislike for the governor and the mayor.
I think you're right. It must just be the letter behind their name, and that's harm to our state, and that contributes to the harm and the lack of progress here, where people think that not only that it's appropriate behavior, but that they're taking time away and energy away from these students who did a great thing and using them as like they use women and children as a political football, and they should be ashamed of that.
Well, where do you see the state going? As you say, white Democrats have become an endangered species at the Capitol. Is that going to change, or will there soon be maybe just you and nobody else?
There's 6 white Democrats in the House right now, 2 in the Senate, and 1 is leaving. It would be a permanent damage to the state if the legislature became permanently racially divided when all Republicans were white and all Democrats are black. That you can't recover from that. I do have hope that there's going to be a boomerang and a sort of balancing of the scales, that Republicans, if they have.
Well, we do have to roll, Mandie Landry, but thanks for going into overtime. You're a delightful guest. We'll be calling again soon. And thanks to you for listening. Hope you had a good holiday. We're back tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, stay safe and stay tuned.